Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus Today. Tacitus Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you're driving along in your car or your truck. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the Western, well, not just the Western, but the baby bust generally. You see it in places like Japan and South Korea these days. But I'll talk primarily about the White West and the baby bust. And ask, well, why is this happening? And given that one of the leading causes at least that's touted, not that I accept it, one of the leading causes is supposed to be that women are now getting advanced education, going to university and pursuing these wonderful, fulfilling careers. And they just, having children is just not something that's on their radar. And they want to, again, pursue these fulfilling careers and just don't want to have families, or if they do, it's just one child instead of the 2.4 children or 2.5 children was very much the case in the 60s and 70s. Now, let's just have a look at that. There's a few outliers here, places like, for example, Israel and parts of Mongolia or a couple of the erstwhile Soviet republics they're probably middle-range economies, Israel being more advanced, but some of the middle-ranged economies, such as Mongolia and places like Kazakhstan and the likes, they're holding up fairly well. Now, you can say, well, there's a lot of Islamic influence there and so on, but that's not the case with Israel, obviously, and they are able to procreate at better than replacement rates. So why is it that some places can do it and have, again, a higher economic participation for women, and yet other regions can't do it? So let's just have a look at this in the wider context and see where we go. Now, advanced education for women, I've never really thought, this idea that women have been held back and suppressed and repressed and prevented and held down by evil patriarchy, I've never bought into that. It's never seemed realistic to me. It's always seemed like propaganda nonsense. I mean, the reason I say that is my grandmother was a successful business owner, did very well. My grandmother's sister had a successful business with antiques, valuing them, and antiques did very well. They also had a regular column in some of the antique magazines. So my mother went to university. So this was, this idea that women were being held back was something I just didn't see. Even when I was a kid, the majority of teachers in primary school and even in high school, the majority were women. So again, it didn't appear to me that women were being held back at all. So, and if they were, it wasn't noticeable, I think, to anybody who was any onlooker. So let's have a look at how the advanced education for women, and then let's come back and see if it is a major or a leading or even a primary cause, because I'm not sure it is. But when I was a kid, like say in primary school, where I had friends that had older sisters that were leaving high school, typically they were married at 17 or 18, typically the first child at 19. Or certainly a child married with a child before the 21st birthday, and that was quite normal. That wasn't considered unusual in any way. Now the age started to sort of creep up a little bit, I guess, by the time I was in high school, and certainly when I was in senior high school. But even in senior high school, it wasn't unusual for girls to finish high school, even senior high school, and within months of leaving the school, they were married, and then months after that, the first child would come along. I remember being in, I think, the year 11 of high school. So this is senior high school, and friends of mine, again, older sisters, that sort of thing. They would come to the school to show that they were married and show off their newborn baby, and I looked at them in that time and thought, how terribly grown up they were and sophisticated and mature and whatnot. But so even then, it was quite normal. Now, there was a class divide with senior high school. Typically, senior high school in a working class area would be made up of nearly all boys. You'd be hard pressed to find many girls at all. This would have been sort of, I'm talking like, I don't know, mid to late 70s, that sort of thing. In the wealthier areas, then you would find a higher proportion of girls going on to senior high school. But even so, in a merit-based system where you either passed or failed the exam, very few girls were passing. In working class areas, very few people were passing, boys or girls were passing the exams. And so the numbers that went on to senior high school were pretty small in the working class areas, much higher in the more affluent areas. And I remember, being in an affluent area in senior high school, there was the girls were probably more than a third, I would think, overall in the senior high school years. But girls were slightly in the majority come the junior high school graduation. And so the proportion of girls that flunked the tests and left school at the end of junior high school was much higher than boys. I remember being a little upset by this because the hottest chicks. This is like a 15-year-old high school kid's perspective, but the hottest chicks were always flunking the exams and leaving, and the hot chicks, or the chicks left behind, weren't anywhere near as hot and far fewer in number. But there you go. That's a 15-year-old kid's perspective on things. But the affirmative action was just starting to kick in high school, just as I was finishing. They were just kicking off there. And I remember the conversations between amongst the teachers, particularly that it was quite heavily unionized, still is, and they were starting to fixate on outcomes. So they were saying quite openly, and I remember overhearing these conversations amongst the teachers. They were saying, well, look, as long as we've got strictly merit-based exams, boys will always be, the school was 99.9% white, but boys will always be heavily overrepresented. So we have to consider not merit outcomes, but equalizing outcomes. In order to equalize outcomes, then we have to lower the standards and give affirmative action type passes to girls in order to create an equal outcome. So even then they were talking about the amount of kids that go to university should be equal numbers of boys and girls, regardless of merit. Now, if you have a merit system, then hardly any girls go to university. But if you have an affirmative action, like a quota system, then you can create these equal outcomes. And that was already being talked, hadn't been fully put into effect at the time, but it was already being talked about. And that was creating a difference. Now, and it was around this time that girls started to get these affirmative action passes and go to university. Now, it was clearly, this idea that girls magically overnight became suddenly much cleverer and started passing exams is utter and complete nonsense. The whole thing was a political concoction, like a social engineering concoction, because no sooner does the politician come out and say, well, I think more girls should go to university, then, within moments of that utterance, suddenly girls are passing all sorts of tests that they never used to pass previously, and were going on to university. Now, they created a number of poetry, a degree in poetry appreciation, and that was all girls, and the sciences and the business and the accounting, and there were very few girls. The numbers did increase, but there were very few girls in that. The girls were clustered almost completely in the soft arts courses, peace studies. This is initially. Very small numbers, of course, were in other courses, but they were there. Now, the view was that particularly the sort of communist Marxist type view, and you saw this in Soviet Soviet society and even in China as well. This idea of having women or having equal outcomes in advanced education, and particularly class-based. So the more working class you were, the more that you would get a quota place in a university, because that would equalize society. It would remove class, and so it was ideologically imagined. So anyway, more girls started staying in senior high school. Were actually given an allowance. Their parents were paid a weekly sum directly if the girls stayed in senior high school. This was in Australia, at least. And then they got affirmative action graduation from senior high school to university. And then there were a whole range of social studies, nobody fails type courses there for girls to do. So you had masses of girls running around with degrees in poetry appreciation or drama or interpretive dance or something like that. So the education hadn't been advanced at all, and more low IQ girls were being pushed into university, otherwise wouldn't have gone or couldn't have gone. They wouldn't have passed. So when we look at why birth rates dropped, and putting aside economic reasons for a moment, if you get the brightest girls going to university, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But once you lower the standards and give affirmative action and quota type arrangements to university, then the lower IQ girls, or the girls without the high IQ, maybe that's a better way of putting it, they would have left school as they used to at 15, and they would have done a couple of years apprenticeship as, I don't know, a hairdresser or something. They'd have got married and had children. That was how it was. And that kept birth rates at 2.5 women, 2.5 children rather per woman. So marriage rates were high. Initially, divorce rates were low, and again, this 2.5 births per woman, so easily above replacement rate. The standard of living was modest, very small but compact, 3-bedroom houses, one toilet and a carport, and that type of situation. Often a septic tank rather than being on the sewer. But anyway, that was the sort of structure of life there. But as these lower IQ or non-high IQ women were encouraged to stay on at senior high school, that means they weren't doing the traditional apprenticeships that women might have done, such as hairdressing and things like that. And then they went on to university. So instead of procreating at 17, 18, they're now 21 years old, and they're being told that not only are they geniuses now, and this newfound erudition of getting a degree in interpretive dance or lesbian studies or something, that marriage is as Betty Friedan described it, a caged hell for women. And look, if you're a high IQ lesbian, sure, marriage would be a caged hell. But if you're not a high IQ lesbian, then it's not. It's actually quite a worthwhile lifestyle choice. So these women, these low IQ girls or young women now, were staying on at university and were going to have these fulfilling careers. Now, the amount of fulfilling careers available to anybody, let alone women, are very small, because you need to be making, in income terms, you need to be making at least 3 times the average wage. Otherwise, you're just not a player in anything. And so the amount of people that make 3 times the average wage now is a very small proportion of the population, less than 5%. So there's, assuming women even have half of those, then only 2 or 3 of every 100 women have even a prospect, a shot at a fulfilling career. And a lot of these highly paid jobs are quite high, not all, but a lot of them are quite high stress jobs, particularly if it's related to performance. Women tend to avoid performance or jobs where they'll be measured on performance, but nonetheless, so the opportunities never were out there for these massive fulfilling careers. So, so as fewer women were available to procreate, and women with lower IQs were being given quota places and affirmative action places in university and in employment, particularly in the public service and so on, then they simply had less time to procreate, and they did have what was seen as a somewhat viable alternative lifestyle. And given they were also being told that all men are rapists, Nazis, and oppressors, and if he doesn't wash the dishes every night, then he's oppressing you, things like that, then they've been conditioned to see marriage as something where he must constantly prove that he's letting her be equal. And this creates huge pressure on any relationship, let alone a marriage. And so divorce rates were going through the roof, and that too was having an impact. Similarly, the government moved in and said to women, look, if he lets you down, we will be your husband, we'll be your provider. And the government as a provider never got sick. They never lost their jobs. They never gambled their money away. Or so the government was a much more reliable provider than any man could ever be, unless it's a high income sort of guy with a long term sort of solid career. But even then, so there's fewer women available for procreation, and a large body of women, as in in Australia at least, millions of women over the time who would have had procreated and got married, now have shitty jobs, in a retail store, and they don't want to, but they've been conditioned to see marriage as an undesirable option and to see men as feckless oppressors. And of course, because many of the well-paying jobs have been taken away now, then there's the pool of men who can provide a lifestyle to women that the men could in the 60s and 70s. That pool of men is very small now, very small. So whereas 75 of 100 men could provide a lifestyle to women in, say, 1970, today it's 2 out of every 100 men can provide an equivalent sort of lifestyle to women. So the pool of options is much smaller. The cost of living having gone up and so on has changed, drastically changed the economics. But let's have a look at this. So I'm not surprised. I think it's obvious why women have, why women are not procreating as much. The minute that women were entering the workforce in large numbers, they were diluting wages. So this has had the effect of course, increasing or rather reducing the purchasing power of the paycheck. So why are places like Mongolia and Kazakhstan and Israel, why are they still procreating, even though they're in the middle range of incomes or in the upper range of incomes in the case of Israel? Why are they still procreating and procreating at better than replacement rate? And vis-a-vis why is, say, Australia not, or Britain not procreating it, or white people not procreating it? And it's not just a white people thing. Again, Japan and Korea, China, there are only a few places in the world where procreation above replacement rate. Now they're the dirt poor basket case countries of Africa and parts of Afghanistan, places like that. But Kazakhstan, as a case in point, or Israel, their incomes they're not basket case countries, and yet their procreation rates are better than replacement. And Kazakhstan, there's a lot of people in the Islamic faith there, but it's hardly a super devout form of Islamic observance. So, and Israel obviously isn't an Islamic state. So it is possible to do. Now, if you look at places like Hungary, where they've made a concerted effort trying to use the tax system in particular to, like, a woman, I think it's if she has 4 children, then she doesn't pay tax in her whole life. So using the tax system and that sort of stuff, it's had some effect. I'm not sure they're really, in a net sense, achieving replacement procreation. So there's something there that needs to be done. Is it cost of living that causes women to have children? Is it confidence in the future? Is it confidence in your fellow citizens, as in, confident that there's men out there who want to marry you and who will be reliable partners, and you're a reliable partner to them? What are the issues? Is it the availability of jobs? Is it, there's obviously a lot of, it's quite nuanced. There's a lot of things that go into it, and confidence in the future, of course, has to be among those. But why is it, Israel, for example, their future, you'd have to describe their future as rather tenuous. They're surrounded by Islamic states that don't believe Israel has a right to exist and would happily get rid of it at the drop of a hat. And yet Israeli women are quite prepared to procreate. Is it government programs? Is it generous childcare? Is it closely knit families? Now, this integration of the family in the West and independent living outside of the family and family generations is obviously playing a role in this. For example, when I was a kid, I used to remember where, say, in lower working class wages, both people had to work in order to get by, or not to get by per se, although there was that, if they wanted to get ahead. I remember people, both husband and wife, working to put their kids through an expensive private school, for example. They would do that. They didn't have to do that, and they could get by on one wage, but they wanted something better, and that required two wages. And so either the husband or the wife's parents, generally the wife's parents, as I recall, would look after the children, say, pick them up after school or something like that, would look after the children while the parents were working. And so the grandparents were, because if you had to pay for childcare, then it would be equivalent to the cost of, the wage of what you were making. I remember there's a guy who used to work on weekends in a bar or something like that, I think it was. I'm going back to when I was a kid, so just remembering what people were doing. He worked in a bar and he made not a whole lot of money, but he did that, and she did something on the weekend as well. So they were, I think he had a night job as well as a weekend job, and she had a weekend job. I think that's how it went. And I remember another family where he could increase his pay by 30% if he did shift work, working at nights and afternoons. And so he did that, and not that he wanted or anybody wanted it. He did it to make more money, again, to put the kids through school and that sort of stuff. So there were those sort of things going on. But the grandparents, or could be an auntie or something, other family members, you weren't leaving your kids with strangers. You were leaving them with family members that were earnestly involved in wanting to help you be successful and helping you do okay, helping the kids do all right. They wanted to invest in the family, and they were doing that, and were happy to do it, and would go out of their way to do it. And so when families started to disintegrate and live independently, that sort of support structure went away. And I know from women that still have school-age children, that particularly earlier school, where when they look at their childcare and say she's, he does okay, he's got a good wage, she's gone to work because, again, they want to do better, live in a nicer house, that sort of stuff. But she has to pay childcare, childcare payments before and after school, because she starts work at 8 and she's usually not back until 6:30. So she's paying childcare, and this equals 3/4 of her pay. It's that expensive now. So she questions at times whether it's even worth it. And without government support and so on, or family support, or some means of support that you don't have to pay for, then it's working for her to work. It's quite marginal. And so it's now where she believes she has to take another job on top of that job, which then involves more childcare. And so I mean, it's crazy. So whether there's support there, but why are the Israel? I'll use Israel because they're the most advanced economy. Why are the Israelis able to procreate at better than replacement rate, or at least replacement rate? Is it the family that's looking after them? Is it free childcare? And what is it? There are, I mean, just looking at it without a deep and exhaustive drill down, just looking at it, it seems to be a society-wide decision to do it rather than just ad hoc individual rando families deciding, oh yeah, well, we'll have 3 kids or 4 kids. It seems to be more than that. And again, given the uncertain future that the Israelis have, then you would think it's not that. Is it they've got some government support structure? Doesn't appear to be so, or nothing that's overtly obvious that I can see. So is it family members? Quite possibly. Is it some sort of community? Is it like the kibbutz sort of concept where people you don't know but who share your faith, your values, and your vision, that they will look after your children for you and this sort of stuff? Do they have the brutal pedophile type laws that exist in the West today? And I'll give you an example. This is when my wife and I were staying in just while we had some work going on in the downtown area of the city. We were staying in an apartment, and one day a woman who I didn't know particularly well. My wife was out, but I didn't know. Like, we'd said hello and exchanged pleasantries, lovely day today, and that sort of thing. And she said that she had to go and do something critically important, and there was I think it was a teacher's strike or something like that. So there was no school that day, and she hadn't been able to arrange childcare. She had a babysitter coming over, but then the babysitter pulled out at the last minute. So in desperation, she knocked on our door and said, "Look, would I look after her like 7 or 8 year old daughter while she went off to do whatever it was she was doing?" Now, I'm more than happy to help a neighbour or someone in need, and the Good Samaritan story of the injured dude at the side of the road being helped by a stranger. And, I'm into all of that sort of stuff. I think it's important we help each other and help people in need. I think that is important. And if I saw a lost kid wandering around, I would take them to the nearest police station, or call someone to come and get them, or do something rather than leave the kid unattended. But anyway, she knocks on the door and, would I look after? And I had to say no, not because I didn't want to help, or I was, I could see this. She was in the mother was in a very agitated state. As far as I know, she's a single mother and so on. So as I was thinking it through, she ticks all the boxes: single mother, female child, vulnerable. I'm a straight white male. I'm the oppressor Hitler, and da 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 da. So I can't take the risk. The risk is too high, because all that kid needs to say, say the mother's having a bad day, and I viewed her as being temperamentally unstable. So, but not malicious per se, but she comes back having a bad day, and then she, did he touch you? Well, what did he do? This sort of thing, and that sort of explosive or potentially explosive situation could be that she, next thing you know, an allegation is made, and that's it. I'm as good as arrested and thrown in prison for 900 million years just on that. No evidence needed. You did it, you damn straight white male fucking Nazi, because that's the propaganda around the place. So I had to say, look, I can't help you. No, sorry, can't do it. No. If there was a witness in the house, like my wife was there or someone else, then okay. But I'm on my own in the house with this 8-year-old kid. I don't know her or the kid. There's no levels of social trust in our society. Generally, we've been encouraged to lose social trust in each other. And so that caused me to say, no, can't help. She's on the verge, mother's on the verge of tears, but I think, can't you help me? No, can't. And I felt bad, but that's the situation that our society is in now. Without a witness or without something like, I'm not prepared to expose myself to that level of risk in that scenario. Now, Israel, as best I can tell, they appear amongst each other. They appear to have relatively high levels of social trust in different ways, perhaps, than we have in the Christian West, but nonetheless, high level. And so, is it the wider community social trust that's the issue here in Israel? Is it something else? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I've looked at it and thought that, well, it could be a number of things, and it could be a number of things in combination and aggregation. But the bottom line is that they're able to procreate at replacement rate with a very high number of women. Most women are going to, or many women, if not most, are going on to university and studying courses that seem to be more demanding than Western women get. There isn't the same level of interpretive dance degrees and lesbian dance degree. Those are things that we see all over the West today, which just drag low IQ women into supposed advanced education courses, saddle them with debt too. So what's going on with Israel? Why are they able to do it? Now, if they can do it, it clearly can be done. They're an advanced sort of Western economy and so on, high levels of education, on average, very high levels of education, high levels of women going to university, studying demanding courses, and exacting type regimens of study and all that sort of stuff. So given that, then they should really be down around the 1 to 1.4 levels of procreation per woman. But instead they're I think around 3 or 3.1. So this would clearly indicate in an advanced economy with high levels of female education that it can be done. So what are the Israelis doing that the rest of us are not? You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.